You have to do before you talk about what is happening now, I think it's probably useful to go back and you have to really start at the end of the great financial crisis. And the reason is there was a bunch of people coming out of the GFC who confused what the US government and some European governments were doing. At the time, there was the risk of a huge financial contagion. And so the US stepped in and the Federal Reserve started to use their balance sheet to buy toxic assets. And the ECB did that, and I think Japan did that as well. Anyways, a bunch of governments did it. And then there was this body of pseudoscientific economists who coined this thing called modern monetary theory, which basically said, hey, you can keep printing money and introducing it into the economy to smooth things out and to actually drive long-term growth. And it turns out that a bunch of government officials fell for it. And if you fast forward to 2022, so 14 years later, governments around the world had printed something to the tune of about 35 odd trillion dollars of money into the economy that should have never been there. So the thing to remember is, like, we have not necessarily just been obfuscating true supply demand in the last 6 or 8 months when we've been talking about a recession or inflation. We've been actually doing it since 2008. It's just that it's been building up in the system. So one of the things that we have to realize is that all of that money somehow needs to get destroyed in some way, shape, or form if the true economic equilibrium is meant to be found. What is true supply? What is true demand in the absence of government sloshing money around, trying to prop up things that should not be propped up, or buying votes, or all the grifts that these folks have engaged in the last decade and a half have to get undone. So that's the backdrop. So if you think about taking $30 trillion out of the global economy, you're talking about almost, I think it's 85 trillion is the world GDP. So it's almost half of an entire year's worth of global GDP. It's going to take 3 years probably of the slow, meticulous, running off of money, not reintroducing new money. So it seems like we're at the beginning of something that's going to be long and drawn out. And that's separate from whether we're in a recession or not. That's just the bear market that we're in. Right? And so you have to look at asset prices today as a microcosm of a much larger trend that has to be about fake money pushing asset prices up, and now taking all that fake money out and finding out what the real price of something is. And I just don't think that takes 6 months. So for all the people that were, fingers crossed, hoping that this would be the end of it, Fed raises 75, we're done with this, they're going to raise 75 more. I just think that's not how it's probably going to be. It's going to take, 24, 36 months. That may mean the bottom doesn't happen for another 18 months. So I think we're in for a lot of choppy market action. We may not be negotiating against Russia, but we're enabling them to print enormous surpluses. Meaning, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was an article today. Janet Yellen is traveling around basically convincing folks to not include Russian oil from a bunch of import bans so that these Russian oil tankers can be insured. Why? So that they can sell this oil to places like China and India, etc.
The ruble's at a 5-year high.
We push for all these sanctions. Europe gets on board and says, we're going to do it and we're going to take the lumps. And then we go around Europe and basically say, well, we kind of want to fight this proxy war, but at the same time, we want to try to fix inflation. And we didn't mean to cause this. And it's completely disorganized what's happening. Okay. Look, here's the thing. I think we have to also be sensitive to the fact that the Fed operates on a certain class of...
I want to give all honor and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of GMS. Shalom to the hopeful elect, preaching his word in truth and sincerity. And shalom to you sisters, to you ribs out there, learning in silence and staying in order. Right? So as we know, the US dollar is collapsing, man. And as we already know, this was prophesied to happen. The small hatters are now adopting the yen, right? I'm going to go into that. This is in the website, the Jerusalem Post. It says Israel adds Chinese RMB to central bank reserves for first time, cuts the US dollar holdings. And that's major, man, because these small hatters made a profit, a killing off of the U.S. dollar and the people there, sending billions of dollars yearly to the land of Israel, right? says Israel's, whose foreign currency reserves have traditionally been made up of dollars, euros, and British pounds, will add 4 new currencies, including the Chinese yuan. The Bank of Israel has added 4 new currencies, including the Chinese yuan or the renminbi, to its holdings for the first time in the country's history. Bloomberg reports last week the central bank will also trim U.S. dollar and U.S. And euro holdings in a bid to diversify, as they say, right? Its foreign reserves. The report says, because the small headers control what the money flow is like. So money to them means nothing. They're letting you know that they're weakening Babylon. They're setting her up alongside her, her 10 horns. They're getting ready to be turned up and make them separated. So they're no longer together, and Britain will turn on America eventually over money, because that's how Esau is, man. No honor amongst thieves, right? Says Israel's foreign currency reserves, which last year exceeded 200 billion for the first time, have traditionally been made up of dollars, euros, and British pounds. Israel will now include Canadian dollars and Australian dollars in its foreign currency reserves, as well as the Japanese yen and the Chinese renminbi. I can't even say that. But the small headers are all acquiring and trying to bring all the dollars in, because they control them, and eventually it's all gonna go digital. So this is a push, right? Or that's just this damn dragon trying to claw his way into power and maintain it. So he's getting ready to make major moves by destabilizing the dollar and the pound and the euro. Right? It says the reshuffle was a change in Israel's whole investment guidelines and philosophy. Bank of Israel Deputy Governor Andrew Beer said, adding that the rise in Israel's foreign exchange reserves forced the central banks to consider the need to earn a return on the reserves that will cover the cost of liability. The central bank, which as recently as 2020 held 67.4% of its foreign exchange in dollars, 30.1 in euros, and 2.5 in British pounds, now plans to have the pound and yen account for 5% each. The yuan will account for 2% of its holdings, while the currency of Canada and Australia will each be 3.5%. A reduction in U.S. dollar and euro holdings is planned to make room for the new reserves being held. U.S. dollar holdings will go from 65.5% in 2021 to 61%, down about 8.3%, while euro holdings will be reduced from 30.8% to 20%, down to 35%. Chinese yuan and de-dollarization. China has pushed for a larger role in the foreign exchange sphere for the renminbi with limited access. International Monetary Fund data shows that the renminbi shares of global currency reserves rose to a record 2.79% by the end of 2021. However, efforts to expand renminbi's holdings have been met with criticism of the Chinese government's tight regulation limits on exchange and accusations of currency and devaluation. Right? So, at the end of the day, we know the small hatters possess the control of the monetary system, yet they are still despised. Amalek is despised among most of the powers that be, right, including Babylon. But they respect them because they're the ones that hold the resources, so to speak. Right. So this is the book of Ezekiel. Okay, let me go to the book of Ezekiel. 27. Says, the ships of Tarshish did sing of thee in thy market, and thou was replenished and made very glorious in the midst of the sea. The roars have brought thee in great waters, and east wind has broken thee in the midst of the seas. Thy riches and thy fares, thy merchandise, thy mariners, and thy pilots, they caulkers, and the occupiers of thy merchandise, and all thy men of war that are in thee, and in all thy company which is in the midst of thee, shall fall into the midst of the seas in the day of thy ruin. The suburbs shall shake at the sound of the cry of the pilots, and all the handle, the oar, the mariners, and all the pilots of the sea shall come down from their ships. They shall stand upon the land, and shall cause her voice to be heard against thee, and shall cry bitterly, and shall cast up dust upon their heads. They shall wallow themselves in their ashes, and they shall make themselves utterly bald for thee. Right? Because when somebody makes himself bald for thee, that means that something has died. So you're wailing of the death of something, right? Which is Babylon's, the scarlet robe and the gold and all that's gonna be, hewn down, and people are gonna mourn because of it, right? And they shall make themselves utterly bald for thee, and gird them with sackcloth, and they shall weep for thee with bitterness of heart and bitter wailing. And in their wailing they shall take up a lamentation for thee, and lament over thee, saying, what city is like Tyrese, like the destroyed in the midst of the sea? When thy wares were went forth of the sea, thou fillest many people, thou didst enrich the kings of the earth with the multitude of thy riches and of thy merchandise, right? Because this place was always looked at as a place of prosperity and, peace and freedom. And this is why people will lament when this place is gone. It says, and in that time when thou shalt be broken by the seas and the depths of the waters, by merchandise, and all thy company in the midst of thee shall fall. All thy inhabitants of the isles shall be astonished at thee, and their kings shall be sore afraid. They shall be troubled in their consonance, and the merchandises among the people shall hiss at thee, and thou shalt be a terror, and never shall be any more. It's a scary thing, man, to fall in the hands of the Lord, man. In Romans 9, it says that for this cause I raised Egypt up, right? So he could show his power across the world, right? So he had this real powerful, indestructible nation be thrust through, right? Or destroyed, just so he could let you know that it was Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai that did it. And they're talking about that till this day. All right, this is Revelations. We're gonna go to Revelations 18, and we're going to go to verse 2. It says, and let's go to verse 1. And after these things I saw another angel came down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, it is fallen, it has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, and that ye be not partakers of her sin, and ye receive not of her plagues, for her sins have reached unto heaven. Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai has remembered her iniquities. Right? And this is why the people lament, because they have gotten rich and love the delicacies, which is the music, the philosophies, the freedom, the independence that they push forth through all the nations. They were drunk off of this wine. Right? Verse 9, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of the torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Right? And we're seeing it right now with the devaluing of the dollar, and, they're scrambling for oil and all these things, man. We are... The Babylon's trying to put a picture up as if it's stable still, and people are not falling for it anymore. And when the missiles hit, everybody will hiss at her, right? And call Allah Yahweh Yahushai for that, because we're all tired on this side, man. And we just we pray that we are following that number. With that, I'm gonna say shalom.